A lot of folks have heard of the Mothman that haunts the woods of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. But did you know several people have spotted something eerily similar in the Chicago area as recently as 2019? Is it the same creature making the long flight to Chicago? Is it a subspecies of the West Virginia Mothman? Or is it just a case of mass hysteria? The jury is still out on it, so you be the judge. The Point Pleasant Mothman originated in the 1960s. Since it was seen shortly before the Silver Bridge collapse in 1967 that killed 46 people, it's said to be an omen of impending tragedy. Several sightings of the Chicago Owlman were reported in 2017, but no disasters occurred in Chicago that year. The descriptions of the Chicago Owlman seem to resemble a bat or an owl more than a moth. Although the Chicago Owlman hasn't attacked or injured anyone, it has absolutely terrified everyone that has encountered it. August 22nd, 2011, Southwest Chicago. Tim and his wife live in the southwest suburbs of Chicago. On their way back from a business trip in downtown Chicago, they decided to take a side trip to their old stomping grounds to see if anything had changed. Shit always changes. Tim remembered a giant depiction of a Native American on the roof of a tobacco store nearby. He wanted to see if it was still there. When they got there, he noticed it was. He decided to take a picture of it for nostalgia. Plus, he had just gotten a new smartphone and wanted to see how good the camera was on it. He got out of the car and took 4 pictures of it at different angles. He casually pocketed his phone, got back in the car, and headed home. Later that night, he looked at the pictures he took. In one of the pictures, he saw what he thought was a plane or a drone on the backside of the statue. At first, he didn't think much of it, but just for the hell of it, he enlarged the area to get a better look. When he did, he noticed it looked similar to a bird or a bat. It almost looks like a wingsuit. He was reluctant to tell anybody because he figured there was probably a simple explanation. Eventually, he sent it to several experts to analyze the picture. They could not give him an explanation as to what it was. September 30, 2011, University Park. It was a typical Friday night. Sarah and her roommate Amy were getting ready to go out on the town and have a few drinks at the local bar. Sarah had just finished taking a shower and Amy was in her room getting dressed. As Sarah was putting on some clothes, she heard Amy scream loudly from her room. Thinking she must have fell or something, Sarah rushed to her door. It was open, so she walked in. She saw Amy cowering in the corner of the room, shaken and white as a ghost. She was babbling incoherently and nervously pointing. Sarah calmed her down. She gave her a couple of shots and a gummy. She asked Amy what happened. Amy said, Something was looking in at me from the window," and pointed at her bedroom window. Sarah looked at the window but didn't see anything, except streetlights coming in from across the way. They live on the 3rd floor with no balcony. Sarah said, "There's no way somebody could have been out there. It's a 30-foot drop to the courtyard below." Amy screamed, "Damn it! I know what I saw!" She was hysterical and completely freaking out. She took her to the living room to calm her down some more. After about 20 minutes, and several shots later, she calmed down enough to explain what she was so frightened of. Amy stated, "While I was getting dressed, I turned to face the mirror on my dresser and saw a pair of brightly lit orange eyes staring at me from the window." She went on to describe the creature, saying it resembled a giant bat. During her description, she started screaming again. She backed herself into a corner. She was overwhelmed with the feeling of complete terror. Sounds like Amy needs something a little stronger. Sarah tried to rationalize what it was, saying it was probably an optical illusion or the jitters from a hard week of studying. Amy angrily dismissed the explanation and said, "Sarah, I saw what I saw." As Sarah was comforting her, she heard her phone ring from her bedroom. She got up to answer it. It was her boyfriend, Josh. As Sarah was explaining to him what had happened, she walked by Amy's open bedroom door. To her absolute horror, she also saw a pair of glowing orange eyes looking through the same window right at her. "It's back!" She froze and stared at them for 3 to 4 seconds when suddenly it left. Like Amy, she started screaming wildly at the top of her lungs. She dropped her phone and sprinted back to the living room. Frantic, her boyfriend asked, "Sarah, what's wrong? Are you there? Sarah, what's going on? You need to get there, dude." Within 2 minutes, Josh arrived and started pounding on their door. The neighbors heard all the screaming, running, and pounding and were about to call the police. When Sarah answered the door, she explained that they were all right and pleaded with them not to call the cops. Yeah, that'd be a tough one to explain to the cops. When Josh held her, Sarah lost complete control of her emotions. Through sobs and tears, they both explained to Josh what had happened. Josh, with a surprised look on his face, began to tell them of what he had seen on the way to their apartment. He said he saw a large bat perched on a basketball backboard with bright orange eyes. He was going to do an alley-oop. He said when he saw him, it took off in an audible whoosh. He said he was not the only one who saw it. There were 5 or 6 other people in the park that saw the bizarre creature. It was 6 to 7 feet tall, dark gray, and its eyes glowed like orange embers. After it took off, he tracked it for about 5 seconds before it disappeared behind some buildings. That's when he picked up the phone and called. When he heard her screaming over the phone, he sprinted full speed to her apartment. Amy refused to go back to her bedroom until the daylight of the next morning. She closed and locked the window and drew the blinds, saying that was the only way she felt safe. Well, I know of a better way. 4 days later, Josh told Amy an interesting fact. He said that several students around the campus were talking about a giant bat that some folks had seen flying around campus on Friday night. October 14, 2011, UIC campus. Steve was enjoying an evening with his girlfriend and taking a break from his studies. They were taking a walk on this unusually warm evening through the park. During their stroll, they noticed a gathering of about 4 or 5 people ahead, pointing at the sky. As they were approaching them, he saw something large fly overhead out of the corner of his eye. He explained, "It looked like a man, only it had wings. It was gliding around about 10 to 12 feet overhead. It was perfectly silhouetted against the evening sky. The best way I can describe it is it looked like an oversized sugar glider. Except its eyes were glowing red." That first picture kind of looked like a sugar glider, now that I think about it. At first, he thought it was someone in a hang glider, until he saw those damn glowing eyes. To say that I was stunned is an absolute understatement. April 7, 2017, Oz Park area. Tammy was walking her dog, a Jack Russell Terrier, in Oz Park. During the walk, she spotted something on top of some playground equipment. She stopped and looked at it intensely. Her dog, which is normally very protective of her, started whimpering and hiding behind her legs. Good guard dog. When she looked back at the monster, its head spun around and looked directly at her. She said its eyes glowed as if they were on fire and it didn't blink. She described it as mainly black in color with grayish wings. She said the wings didn't look feathery at all, more leather-like, similar to a bat. She stated that the top part of the wings seemed to rise about a foot higher than the head and were folded behind the creature like a gargoyle. After staring at her for 15 seconds, it unfurled its wings. They appeared to be about 10 feet across from wingtip to wingtip and made of some kind of membrane akin to a bat. She said the creature leapt into the air and was gone in seconds. As it flew away, she said it screeched like an owl, only louder and raspier. She said, "Unless you were looking right at it, you would have missed it. Most people were too busy looking at their phones and didn't see it." Typical. She was asked why she didn't take a picture of it. She responded by saying, "Are you fucking kidding me? I was frozen in fear. The thought of taking my phone out of my pocket, pulling up my camera, and taking a picture had never crossed my mind." She said she still goes for walks in the park, just not as often. She stated that her dog is very reluctant to go for a walk with her now. The last time she went, she had to heavily coax her dog to go with her. April 15, 2017, Chicago International Produce Market. Dawn worked at the produce market as a stock person. When Dawn arrived for work at 2 a.m., he saw several guys in the parking lot staring at the sky. Curious as to what's got their attention, he got closer to them and looked up. He saw the biggest fucking owl he'd ever seen. He's 6'2" and said this thing was at least a foot taller than him. It was completely black, except it had yellowish orange glowing eyes, like a cat. It stood there silently and didn't move for a couple of minutes. One of the guys started throwing rocks at it, poking the bear. One of the rocks bounced off the creature and it spread its wings. It had wings like an owl, only considerably larger. You could hear them flap when it took off. Dawn said when it took off, it made a sound like a truck's brakes squeaking. It circled around our area a couple of times, still making the strange sound. Then flew off in the direction of Stevenson Expressway. Dawn stood there and looked for it for a few minutes, but it never came back. Dawn said he felt very uneasy, like a scared kid, and was glad someone threw rocks at it and made it fly away. Yeah, Dawn, somebody had to man up. April 16, 2017, Humboldt Park. CJ was hanging out with his buddies at the park, having a few beers. They were just shooting the shit, hanging out, having a good time. While they were talking, he heard a bird flap its wings. He thought it was odd for a bird to be flying around at night, but he just blew it off. Well, not literally. Then, suddenly, one of his friends called out, "I just saw a monster-sized barn owl over there by the road." CJ and his posse walked over to the area and saw what looked like a gigantic owl by the road. As they crept closer to it, it stood up and turned to look at them. They stopped in their tracks and backed up a little when they saw the size of it. They were wide-eyed and their mouths dropped open. It was about 6 feet tall and very intimidating. It had big, glowing red eyes that were freaking everybody out. When they started yelling in fear, the creature took off into the air with loud, powerful wing flaps. The monster started screeching at them. They quickly grabbed their belongings and dispersed. They noped the fuck out of there. April 25, 2017, Lake Michigan, near Montrose Beach. Sue and her husband were with two other couples out on the lake celebrating a friend's birthday. It was a swingers party. They were about 2 miles out, just off of Montrose Beach at around 10 p.m. While they were talking and having a great time, Sue looked up and saw what she described as a giant bat. She said the bat was as tall as or bigger than her husband. He's 6'5". I wouldn't want to challenge him at a game of basketball. She described it as solid black, with eyes that reflected the moonlight. It was so black, it was silhouetted against the moonlit sky. The monster circled their boat 3 times in complete silence, then headed for Montrose. As it got further away, it started blending in with the night sky until it just vanished. She tried to get a picture of it while it was circling the boat, but The only thing she got was the night sky. A few minutes after that, they saw a bright green object going north to south on the horizon. It was not a plane, but a brilliant green orb about 2 miles away, moving across the horizon. After the object disappeared, they sat there in stunned silence, not sure what they had just saw. Wait, so it's connected to aliens? I'm a little confused. Well, par for the course. She began to feel an overwhelming sensation of dread and told her husband they needed to get out of the water as quickly as possible. April 27, 2017, the Little Calumet River. Gary was out fishing with his son Sean on the Little Calumet River at a spot they have had good luck in the past with catching some fish. Don't tell anyone. Good fishing holes are hard to come by. It's located by a trestle bridge that goes over the river. It was easy to get to, and they have landed some pretty nice medium-sized catfish there lately. It was almost 7:30 p.m., and they started packing up their gear when suddenly they heard a strange noise. It sounded like train brakes when a train is slowing down. The strange thing was, there was no train. It was extremely quiet. Well, except for that damn screeching sound. They heard the sound again and could tell it was coming from above them. They looked up and saw a gargantuan creature flying from their left toward the trees on the other side of the river. It looked like a giant bird, but it was solid black. Within a minute, they heard the sound again. This thing flew straight up and over the trestle bridge and headed off over the river. It was unlike any bird they had ever seen before in their lives. It was solid black and the size of a full-grown man. Gary said, its wingspan was at least a 10-foot spread from tip to tip. Gary said it flew up and out of sight within seconds. It flew like a literal bat out of hell. They stood there and watched it fly away. Sean spoke up. I read there's been several giant bat sightings in the Chicago area lately. Maybe this was one of them. They hastily packed their fishing tackle and got the hell out of there as fast as they could. They couldn't provide very much details on the monster, but Gary later said, frankly, I thank my lucky stars we weren't close enough to get details on this thing. May 5th, 2017, Calumet Park. Henry was out with his son for a walk around in Calumet Park. It was about 8 p.m. and they were talking about what they were going to do for the summer. As they walked toward the field house, something just flew overhead. At first, Henry thought it was a large goose, as he had seen several geese flying around the city recently. Or a duck. However, as they watched it, it became very apparent this was no goose, but something much larger. Henry said he would describe it as a large bat, but it had a human body about 6 feet in length. It was blackish gray with an enormous set of wings, about 8 to 10 feet wide. His son asked, What is that?" Henry nervously replied, I don't know." The giant bat flew up and over the field house toward where the tennis courts are. Then they heard a couple shriek in surprise. I'd find that sadistically comical. He said the entire encounter lasted about 30 seconds. He estimated the speed to be about 45 to 50 miles per hour, and it flew about 15 to 20 feet above them, just above the streetlights. It all happened so fast, he could only get a general description of the beast. Is there a Mothman-like creature flying around in the skies above Chicago? Good possibility. With so many consistent descriptions of it from complete strangers, it's hard to deny something is being seen that is out of the ordinary. Most of these witnesses wish to remain anonymous for fear of ridicule and or losing their job. So it's not like they're trying to get their 15 minutes of fame. And it's obviously a stretch to say everyone's just making up stories and they just so happen to be nearly the same description, actions, and sounds. 4 very similar sightings occurring within 10 days is nothing to sneeze at. Especially since none of the sightings were published until well after they happened. Maybe one day, someone will get a clear picture of the elusive Chicago Owlman and prove that there is a lot more going on out there than we really know about.